All right, hey everybody. Nice to be up here again. I'm still Sheena, CTO of Umuzi, as you mentioned. So I build education systems, and that includes a whole lot of different things. So it does include writing some code and writing some syllabuses and coming up with pedagogical approaches and some UX and some sleepless nights. Python is my love language. And I have a blog in which I talk about tech education. So if that is your vibe, then follow along. And those are my emojis. And I'm going to start off with a demo. So this is a very, very practical talk. I'm just going to be demonstrating different functionality to you. So here is the first of it. So we're going to be testing an application. This is the application. It is a to-do list application. We can delete things from the list, and we've got these like boxes, and they disappear after a little bit of time, and we can like add new things over here, and we can tick boxes. So it looks and feels a lot like a modern single-page app, even though it's a little simple one, but it does a lot of modern feeling things. So how does that work? What is under the hood? So there are a few different things in there. The first one is Django. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Django. Django is the framework for perfectionists with deadlines, such as myself. I like it a lot. It saved my life once. The next thing under the hood is HTMX. So who here has heard of HTMX? All right, who here uses it? All right, just a couple of people. All right, cool. So what HTMX does is it gives superpowers to your HTML. It makes your HTML more powerful. It is able to do like Ajax-y things. So here is the hello world of HTMX. HTMX is just like a very small JavaScript library that you make a script tag, you include it, and then suddenly you've got these extra attributes on your HTML that you can do cool things with. So here we're just saying like when somebody clicks on this button, then do an HTTP post to this endpoint over here, which will return some HTML, and then we're going to like swap out this button with the returned HTML. So it's very, very powerful. You can do all sorts of nifty things with HTMX. Then the next thing is AlpineJS. So for those of you who use HTMX, could you put your hands up again? All right. And keep your hand up if you use AlpineJS also. Okay, cool. So it's a match made in heaven, really, because AlpineJS is also a tiny little JavaScript library, and it also adds superpowers to your HTML by allowing you to manage state in your HTML. So you can do things like declare variables that are available within certain scopes and change those variables' values and make the front end just respond to those values. So it's pretty powerful. Then the last thing that I'm using here is Tailwind, because beautiful is better than ugly. It does, so let me show you a little bit more of a demo, just so I can show you how this thing works under the hood, and then we'll get into testing. So I'm just going to open up the dev tools and zoom in a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to add something here, something. All right, so you can see that as I added something here to the list, we ended up, oh, come on, maybe I need to zoom out again. All right, so we sent off an HTTP request. It had a very, very small payload, and the response is some HTML. So HTMX basically took this HTML and appended it over there. So that's how it works, and that's what we'll be testing today. All right, so all right, cool. So testing is ridiculously important. I don't think I need to tell you that, but what I can tell you is that standard unit testing is insufficient in this case. We can't just get away with testing our Python code because a lot of our functionality is embedded in like these little attributes in the HTML code. So we need to actually test the front end. We should still write unit tests, they're very important, but we need something more. And that is what Playwright is going to bring us. So Playwright enables reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps. That is its kind of catchphrase. Practically speaking, what that means is that Playwright fires up a browser, like a web browser, and then it allows you to interact with that browser using Python code or other languages as well. Usually when I explain that, people are like, is it like Selenium? And I'm like, yeah, sort of. It does a lot of the same things. It allows a lot of the same things. But it's got all these extra test goodies built in. So it's got assertions and expectations and traces and screenshots and nice command line parameters, which you'll meet a little bit later. So that's great. And you can use it for things beyond testing as well, because it is a browser automation tool. So it's really, really nice. I recommend this talk. This is the keynote from DjangoCon US last year, where Andy Knight explained the difference between like Playwright and a couple of different testing tools and like the trade-offs between the different things. Like Playwright is not a silver bullet. It does have its downsides. Learn about them by watching this thing. Yes. All right. So now I'm going to demo Playwright. So here are some tests that I've written for this Django application. There are not a lot of them. There are only 3 of them to keep it simple and small. Now, I'm going to run those tests by typing in Pytest. Okay, let me actually make that a bit bigger. Hopefully it is all visible and nice. Ooh. Terminal. Okay, cool. So we ran the tests, and it was very boring. They all passed. There were some little green dots over there. But we're going to talk about what happened behind the scenes. So here is the first test that I want to show you guys. And it is, let me actually get rid of this. All right, so this is the first test I want to show you guys. It's actually the only test I want to show you guys. I'm not going to go into all of the code in detail, but I want to show you some of the basic mechanisms and how they work. So the first thing to notice here is that we're using Pytest. We're not using unit test. So Django ships with batteries included, and when I was making this thing, I was like, okay, let me keep it as simple and Django-y as possible and not add any like unnecessary bells and whistles. But unfortunately, Playwright fortunately, it has a whole lot of cool mechanisms for plugging into Pytest, but it doesn't have similar mechanisms built out for plugging into unit tests. So if you're using it, you should probably use Pytest. Otherwise, you have to write a whole lot of extra code. So that is why we're using Pytest. Now, here's our first test written in Pytest, and we are making use of 2 fixtures. So this first fixture, live server, is a Django Pytest thing. Basically, when we run our tests, then it spins up the server. It's like run server. So that gives Playwright something to interact with. Then the next thing is this page object. So that fixture is a Playwright thing. What that does is it creates a browser instance, and then it creates a tab on that browser, and then it gives you access to that tab. So then you can tell that tab what to do. All right, so that's what we do. In this test, what we do is we get the URL of the page that we care about. Don't hard code URLs, rather derive them. Then we tell our page to go to that URL, which doesn't seem that fancy. Like, of course, you should be able to do that. But this next line is pretty cool. So here we say page, wait for selector, text, nothing to see. So basically what we're doing, if I go back here, if I delete everything, then when there's an empty page, it should say nothing to see here. So I'm literally just checking that the thing renders properly if the to-do list is empty. Cool. But there's 2 cool things about this line. The one thing is the selector part. We are basically just saying, like, find some text on the page that looks like that, which is cool. You can select things in different ways. So in another test over here, I've got I'm selecting an input, so I'm selecting a form input and I'm interacting with that. Over here, I am selecting a button. I'm saying, find the button named add and click on it. So you can select things in lots of different ways. Now, the really cool thing, actually, is the fact that you're waiting for the selector. So if any of you have done web front-end testing before, then you will have noticed that things are asynchronous, and that causes it to be a bit annoying to test. So sometimes what you'll need to do is click a button and then wait a while, and then the result happens because there's some kind of network request that goes off, something like that. So if your testing tools don't have waits built in, then you need to just you need to do things like, say, time sleep 1000, time sleep 2000. So you've got all these sleep statements in your code, which makes your tests harder to read, it makes them slower to run, And it also means that there could be like false failures. Stuff will just like not work and you'll be like, why is that? Let's just add a random delay and see if that fixes things. So Playwright sorts that out by just checking on things over and over until they show up, and it's got its own like sensible default delays. So that's really nice. Now, when I ran the tests with Pytest, not a lot happened. You just saw like those 3 little dots and whatnot, and it's like, cool, everything passed. And that is because Playwright has some sensible defaults. We are going to turn those off. So the default behavior is that it'll run in headless mode, which means that there is a browser running, but you can't see it. So we can run it in headed mode by using certain command line parameters. I'm also adding slow mo 2000 to say, breathe, Sheena. Adding slow mo 2000 so that every time we ask Playwright to do something, it's just going to wait 2 seconds, and that just makes it easier for us mere mortals to keep an eye on what's happening. So that was the first test. This is the second test, which makes sure it shows up nicely when there is something, and this is adding something to the to-do list. So that's the third test. All right. So that was quite nice. You might have noticed that it's Chromium. You might not have noticed. It was pretty plain. But you can test things out with other browsers as well, such as Firefox. It also does WebKit, but I'm not going to show you WebKit. I also changed slow mo to 1000 just to speed things up a little bit here. Now, often, if you're writing a web application, you'll want to test it across like multiple browsers. So you can do something like this as well, where you just have multiple browsers in the command line parameters. So now, we were, up until this point, running 3 tests. You'll see that we are going to run 6 tests now. So it first does it in Firefox, and then slight delay, then it does it in Chromium. That's quite helpful. All right. Now, something that's really cool is this thing called tracing. So if you have a test that's failing and you don't really know why it's failing, and you want to just take a closer look, then you can turn tracing on. You can also turn tracing on for like only the tests that fail and things like that. So here is what happens. So it just looked pretty normal, but if I go over here, gosh, okay, come on. Golly. All right, sweet. If I look inside my directory structure over here, there is a bunch of stuff that got created. So there's test results over here. So when I run it with tracing on, then it makes these extra directories. And the directory structure is like the name and path of the test, dash Chromium or dash Firefox or dash whatever you're using. And if you look inside there, there is a trace.zip file, which isn't like super readable or anything, but Playwright has a way of reading these things and making them nice and useful. So the command is playwright show trace, and then the path to that zip file. Whoa. Yeah. All right, cool. So it opens up this thing, and I hope it's big enough that it is visible. I'll zoom in a bit. So unfortunately, when I zoom in, this becomes tiny. But basically, you've got a timeline of all the things that happened during your test, and you can see like for a long time we've got this blank page, blank page, blank page, and then the front end loads up, and then we start to interact with the front end in different ways. So that's that. Then on the side here, we've got all of the different commands that we send to Playwright. So it's like, hey, Playwright, go to this URL, then fill in the title box, then click on this button, etc., etc. So all of that is over there. Then you can see over here, there's a scary looking exclamation mark. Let's click on that and see what happens. Oh, that is a warning. So it's telling me that the CDN for Tailwind is not something that I should be using in production. So that's quite useful. Like if there was a bug, then maybe that would be a problem with it, a problem with, with looking at. It also gives you access to all the network calls that happened over time. So I can see when each of these things happened in the timeline, which is very, very helpful. And I can go down to the final action over here, which was where I actually created something. So this was the request to add a new to-do list item to the database, and I can see the request, I can see the response, and I can see the body of the response and the HTML in there. So this gives me like quite a good view of everything that's happening. You can also use like the Python debugger, so like breakpoint, and that works great. But this is a nice visual representation of what's going on. Then the last thing I want to show you. Who's heard of test-driven development? Yes, who's used it? All right, quite a lot of people. This is fantastic. So like when there's a bug in an application, a really nice way to fix it is to write a test that shows that there's a bug and then make that test pass and then the bug doesn't come back. So that's fantastic. Now, whenever there's a user interface involved, if something looks like a bug and it quacks like a bug, then it's probably a bug. This looks a little bit like a bug. When I add something to the to-do list, then the box here doesn't clear. And so it can be a bit annoying to add different things to the to-do list. And so let's say there's a complaint from the users and they're like, we need this thing fixed. Like, all right, cool, let's fix it. Let's write a test that exposes this issue. A really nice way to expose that issue, I'm just going to delete these, I want this clear for now. All right, cool. So a really nice way to do that is with this thing called CodeGen. So Playwright CodeGen, you point it to the URL of a running application. So this does not use your live server. I mean, it does not use, it doesn't use the live server fixture. This is running outside of Pytest. So you need to point it to something that's busy running. Now, when I do that, it opens up a web page. I'm just going to move this somewhere else because it is going to cause chaos. Where can I put it? Over there. That looks good. And it opens up an editor as well. There. All right. And as I interact with this page, as I click on something, you can see that it's recording my activities and it's writing the code for me, which is really nice because like remembering how to get everything by label and by role and all of that, it's kind of a mission sometimes. So it does that for you. Now I can type something in and I can press enter. I can like press enter again if I want to. I can type something else. I can tick boxes. I can do whatever I want to. And so I can interact however I need to, and then I can also make use of these little buttons at the top here, and they're very useful for adding different kinds of assertions. So what I want to do in the end is I want to make an assertion about this box. And so there's the assertion over there, or expect, yeah. So now I'm going to copy all of this, everything just above these, above that commented outline, and I can kill this. All right. Sweet. So now in my code, I am going to make a new test that exposes what I need to test. So this is a test that we want to test that the form clears every time we submit it. So I'm just going to paste in all of that code. And there's quite a lot of it, and a lot of it we don't actually need. So you'll always need to like edit the thing after you paste it in. So the first thing is like we have a page fixture, so anything that we use to come up with the page we can get rid of. And then the other thing here is that we are hard coding a URL, so we don't want that. And then I demonstrated all sorts of weird things. So I filled in the title, I clicked on the title, I filled something in, I pressed enter again, don't need that, and then I filled in some more stuff, and then I toggled some things, and now I have an assertion. So I'm just going to make that, I expect it to be blank. So now if I run my tests, we'll get our 3 green dots and 1 failure after a while. There we go. Cool. So there's a delay there because it's like waiting for it in case it is going to be blank, in case something is going to blank it. Yeah, so that is actually everything that I wanted to show you. Cool. So if you want access to these slides and also to the demo code, then here is a QR code for you. That's it.